poor little girl in a wheelchair gets stuck in the rain. When a janitor approaches and asks, "Where are your parents, sweetie?" she replies, "My mum disappeared, and my dad never cared about me." The young billionaire sees what's happening and is shocked when he recognizes her face. The rain fell as if the sky had decided to crash down onto the city. Thick, heavy drops bounced off the pavement, creating a low mist that danced among the cars stopped at the red light. Logan Carter tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, impatient. His black Audi was warm and dry, the perfect contrast to the world outside. 20 minutes late, he muttered, looking at the clock on the dashboard. The meeting would start without him, but Logan wasn't really worried. Being the owner's son had its perks. The light stayed red, relentless like all things that refuse to cooperate when you're in a hurry. Logan sighed and let his eyes wander across the fogged-up window. That's when he saw her. On the other side of the street, a small figure struggled against the downpour. A little girl in a wheelchair. She couldn't be more than 5 years old, wearing a soaked red coat and a blue beanie that seemed about to fly off in the wind. She pushed the wheels with her tiny hands, but the water formed little streams that pushed her backward. She was alone, completely alone in the rain. "What the hell?" Logan leaned forward, rubbing the foggy glass to get a better look. The girl's chair tilted dangerously when one of the wheels got stuck in a pothole. She tried to steady herself, but her small hands slipped on the wet rims. For one terrible second, Logan thought she would fall. The light turned green, but Logan didn't move the car. Impatient horns blared behind him. He ignored them. From the entrance of a nearby building, a woman in a janitor's uniform ran toward the girl. Her steps were quick and determined, as if she well understood the danger of the situation. "Ma'am!" Logan shouted through the window he'd just opened, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of the rain. Without a second thought, Logan turned on his hazard lights, opened the door, and stepped into the rain. In 3 seconds, he was soaked. The cold water seeped through his expensive suit, but he barely noticed. He ran between cars that were starting to move, ignoring horns and shouts of protest. "Need help?" he asked, approaching the woman who was now holding onto the girl's wheelchair. The woman was in her 50s, with grey hair pulled back in a simple bun. She looked at him warily. Her brown eyes quickly took stock of him, the soaked suit, the pricey watch on his wrist, the hands that had likely never done hard labor. "We're fine," she replied curtly, but her trembling hands, cold from the rain, contradicted her words. The little girl looked up. She had huge blue eyes, shining like lakes under the sun. Her face was pale from the cold, her lips slightly purple. But what most struck Logan was her gaze. There was no fear there, just a calm curiosity, almost adult-like. A blonde curl peeked out from under the blue beanie, sticking to her rosy cheek. "I just want to help," Logan insisted, water streaming down his face. "My car's right there. I can take you wherever you need to go." The woman hesitated. "I'm Ms. Brenda," she said at last. "I take care of that building over there." She pointed to an old structure on the other side of the street. "Ellie here slipped out while I was cleaning the lobby. Her mother's probably worried sick." "I just wanted to see the rain," the little girl protested, her voice thin but surprisingly clear. "It looks different from the windows." "Different how?" asked Logan, feeling water seep into his shirt. "Like magic," Ellie explained seriously, as if it were obvious. "The drops look like stars falling from the sky." Logan couldn't help smiling. "They do, don't they? But how about we find some shelter now? There's a diner right on that corner. Ms." Brenda studied Logan a moment longer than necessary. There was something in her gaze. Distrust, yes, but also evaluation, as if she were measuring his character right then. "I'll call her mother," she finally said. "Let her know we're safe." Logan nodded and, without asking permission, took hold of the wheelchair handles. "Shall we go? This rain isn't stopping anytime soon." They ran, or rather, Logan ran, pushing the chair while Miss Brenda kept pace, shielding Ellie from the relentless rain. The diner was small, with a neon sign blinking "Rose's Diner" in red. The smell of fresh coffee and pancakes filled their nostrils as soon as they entered. "Table for 3, please," Logan said to the waitress, who eyed them in surprise, likely noticing the contrast between the soaked businessman, the middle-aged janitor, and the little girl in a wheelchair. Once seated, Ms. Brenda went to the bathroom to dry off as best she could, after making a quick phone call. Ellie stayed in her chair, taking off the blue beanie and shaking her golden curls like a wet puppy. Logan couldn't stop watching her. "How old are you, Ellie?" he asked, as the waitress placed steaming mugs of hot chocolate on the table. "5," she replied, proudly lifting her hand with 5 small fingers. "Almost 16," she added, as though it made all the difference in the world. "And what were you doing out in the rain by yourself? It's dangerous." Ellie blew on her hot chocolate carefully before answering. "Mr. Whiskers is my friend. Friends don't leave friends out in the rain." The simplicity of her logic disarmed him. Logan smiled, feeling a strange knot in his chest begin to loosen, one he hadn't even known was there. "Your mother must be worried," he said. "Mommy's sick today," Ellie explained, her expression suddenly serious. "She sleeps a lot when she's sick." Miss and Brenda returned to the table, looking a bit more composed. "I called her mother. She's worried, but relieved we know where Ellie is. She'll send someone as soon as possible." "There's no rush," said Logan, surprised at himself for actually meaning it. The important meeting suddenly felt distant and unimportant. As they ate pancakes, Logan's idea quickly approved by Ellie, he couldn't stop looking at the girl's face. There was something about her, something strangely familiar he couldn't put his finger on. The shape of her nose, her eyes, the way she furrowed her brow in concentration while slicing off a particularly large piece of pancake. It was like an echo, a reverberation of something he should know but couldn't recall, like looking at an old photograph of someone you knew in childhood. When Ellie smiled with syrup smeared on her face, something inside Logan shifted, a strange sense of both recognition and protectiveness, as if this little girl he'd just met already had a reserved spot in some corner of his life. As they talked, Logan noticed something that made him freeze for an instant. Ellie's eyes. They were blue like his own, not just in color but shapes, expression. A chill ran down his spine as she watched him with a gaze far too serious for a 5-year-old. "Ms." Brenda watched the scene with quiet interest, her eyes moving from Logan to Ellie and back again. When they finally said goodbye, Ellie's mother had sent a taxi to pick them up. Logan felt strange, like something important had happened, something that would change the course of his life. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Ms." Brenda left the sentence hanging. "Logan Carter," he replied, extending his hand. A flicker of recognition passed through the woman's eyes upon hearing the surname, but she said nothing. She only gave his hand a brief shake. "Bye, Logan." Ellie waved excitedly from her chair. "Will you come again sometime?" "Maybe," he answered with a smile, surprised that he was genuinely considering seeing the child again. On his way back to his car, still drenched but strangely warm inside, Logan couldn't get Ellie's face out of his mind. Those blue eyes, so much like his own, continued to haunt him. There was something there, something important, like an echo of the past he still didn't understand. 3 days had passed since that rainy encounter, but Ellie's image remained vivid in Logan's mind. During important meetings, in the middle of conversations, even when he closed his eyes to sleep, those blue eyes and that sincere smile kept appearing, along with the unsettling sense of familiarity. Logan tried to go back to his routine. He woke early on Wednesday, put on one of his immaculate suits, and drove to Carter Enterprises. In the elevator, he pressed the button for the executive floor and looked at his reflection in the polished metal doors. Something had changed in his face. He couldn't say what exactly, but it seemed different. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," his secretary greeted as he passed her desk. Logan responded with a distracted nod and went to his office. The city view stretched out before the panoramic window. Buildings, cars, tiny people living their lives. Somewhere out there, a 5-year-old girl in a wheelchair was also living hers. He couldn't work. The financial reports in front of him made no sense. The numbers danced before his eyes, refusing to form coherent patterns. By 2 in the afternoon, Logan grabbed his car keys. "Cancel my appointments for the rest of the day," he told his secretary as he walked out. Something personal came up. 20 minutes later, Logan was parked on the same street where he'd met Ellie. The rain had stopped, leaving only puddles reflecting the sky like broken mirrors. The building Miss Brenda had pointed to was old, its facade worn, with an iron gate that had seen better days. Logan took a deep breath and went in. The lobby was small and plain, with battered tile floors and a staircase leading to the upper floors. There was no elevator. A woman was cleaning the floor with slow, methodical movements. When she saw him, she straightened up, leaning on the mop handle. "Mr. Carter," Miss Brenda said, recognizing him instantly. There was no surprise in her voice. "Miss Brenda?" Logan nodded. "I came to see how Ellie's doing." The woman studied him for a few seconds, her life-worn face revealing little of her thoughts. "Apartment 3B, she finally said. "Second floor. Rachel, her mother, isn't doing well today. Just be careful what you say." Logan climbed the worn steps, a strange mixture of anxiety and determination swirling inside him. The second-floor hallway was narrow and dark, with worn doors on both sides. He found 3B and hesitated a moment before knocking. No answer. He was about to give up when he heard a faint sound inside, the recognizable squeak of wheels on the floor. He knocked again, harder. The door opened a few inches, held by a chain. Through the gap, Ellie's blue eyes lit up as she recognized him. "Logan," she exclaimed with genuine excitement. "Mom, it's the man from the rain." The door closed for an instant, probably to remove the chain, and then opened fully. Ellie beamed from her wheelchair, wearing a simple dress with her hair in slightly uneven pigtails. "You came back to see me," she said, maneuvering her chair back to let him in. The apartment was small and tidy, despite worn furniture and walls in need of new paint. There was a couch, a small coffee table, an old TV, and some photos on the wall. The tiny open-plan kitchen had a table for two. "Who is it, Ellie?" A weak voice came from the bedroom. "It's Logan, Mom. He saved me from the rain." A woman appeared in the bedroom doorway, leaning on the frame. She was young, maybe 30, but her face showed signs of exhaustion and illness. She was pale, with dark circles under her eyes. Her hair, the same golden hue as Ellie's, was tied in a messy bun. She wore a faded robe over pajamas. Even in her condition, Logan could see she was beautiful, and there was something in her face, the shape of her cheek perhaps, that reminded him of someone he couldn't quite place. "Mr. Carter," she said, trying to stand a bit straighter, "Ellie hasn't stopped talking about you. Thank you for helping her that day." "Just Logan, please," he replied. And it was nothing. He held out the bag he'd brought. "I brought some sandwiches and fruit. I thought you might like them." Rachel Evans, Logan recalled that name from what Miss Brenda had said, looked at the bag with a mix of gratitude and wounded pride. "You didn't have to," she said, but her eyes betrayed hunger and need. "It's no trouble," he assured her. "I was in the neighborhood and thought of Ellie." Ellie took the bag and peeked inside. "Apples, I love apples." A faint smile brightened Rachel's tired face. "Ellie, what do we say when someone gives us something?" "Thank you, Logan," the little girl exclaimed, already biting into a red apple. "You should probably go," said Rachel, suddenly caught by a fit of coughing. She brought her hand to her mouth, and Logan could see her trembling. Without thinking, he stepped forward to support her, guiding her to the couch. "You need to sit down. Can I get you water?" Rachel wanted to refuse. He could see it in her eyes, but another coughing fit stopped her. Logan went to the kitchen, found a clean cup, and filled it with tap water. "Thank you," she murmured after a few sips. "It's nothing serious, just a persistent flu." But Logan could see it was more than that. The apartment showed signs of scant medicines, and Rachel's deep, dark circles told a story of sleepless nights and constant worries. "Have you seen a doctor?" he asked, sitting in the armchair across from the couch. "I'm fine," she insisted, looking away. Ellie moved closer, her worried eyes on her mother. She placed a tiny hand on Rachel's knee. "Mommy gets sick sometimes," she explained to Logan with the seriousness of someone sharing a big secret. "But then she gets better." Rachel stroked her daughter's hair tenderly. That simple gesture, so full of love, made something tighten in Logan's chest. "I'll come back tomorrow," he said abruptly, "to check on you both." Rachel opened her mouth to protest, but he continued. "And I'll bring something for dinner. No arguments." After he left, giving Rachel his cell number just in case, Logan drove to a pharmacy. He bought cold medicine, vitamins, cough syrup, and other basic remedies. At the supermarket, he filled a cart with enough food to last weeks: canned goods, pasta, rice, fruit, vegetables, meat. It wasn't charity, he told himself. It was... what exactly? The next day he came back, and the next day too. Each visit lasted a bit longer than the one before. He brought food, medicine, small gifts for Ellie, colorful books, crayons, a puzzle adapted to her abilities. He never arrived empty-handed. Rachel, initially distrustful and defensive, began to relax in his presence. Logan noticed she seemed to improve a bit every day, as the medicine took effect and the worry about the next meal eased. On his fourth visit, she greeted him with a genuine smile. She was up, wearing jeans and a simple t-shirt, her hair clean and brushed. "Thank you," she said simply, while Ellie excitedly unwrapped a new book Logan had brought. For everything. Logan felt a warm sensation spread through his chest at seeing mother and daughter healthier and happier. It was a new feeling for him, the simple satisfaction of helping, of making a difference in someone's life. While watching Ellie show off the book's illustrations, he realized he kept returning not out of obligation or guilt, but because he wanted to be there. Because that small apartment, with its worn-out furniture and peeling walls, somehow felt more welcoming than his own luxury place. And because Ellie's face, with eyes so similar to his, kept calling to him like an echo from the past that he couldn't ignore. Weeks went by, and Logan's visits became part of the routine. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, he left the office early. On Saturdays, he arrived in the morning and stayed until late afternoon. His secretary stopped asking about the personal matters that kept appearing in his schedule, and his father, Richard Carter, gave him suspicious looks whenever he ducked out of business dinners. "I have a commitment," Logan would say without elaborating. In the modest neighborhood, Ellie now watched for him from the window. Logan could see her craning her neck to look out, her small nose pressed against the glass. When his car parked, she clapped her hands and spun her wheelchair toward the door. Logan's here," she'd announce, as if it were a major global event. That Saturday afternoon, the rain returned, gentler than on the day they first met. Logan brought a set of brand new colored pencils and a spiral drawing pad with thick paper that wouldn't tear easily. Ellie's eyes sparkled as she received them. "Let's draw together," she said, more an order than an invitation. The living room floor became their canvas. Ellie sprawled on the worn rug surrounded by colored pencils. Logan sat next to her, folding his long legs into a position that would have been comical if it weren't so natural. "What should we draw?" he asked. "A tree with lots of birds, and a treehouse too." Rachel watched from the kitchen as she prepared tea. In the past few weeks, her cheeks had gained a bit of color. The medications Logan discreetly left in the bathroom cabinet were helping, and regular meals were starting to restore her strength. Her thin frame still carried traces of illness, but her eyes were more alive. "I don't know how to draw birds," Logan confessed, holding a blue pencil between his long fingers. "It's easy," Ellie insisted. "You just draw a V like this." She demonstrated confidently, creating a series of V's in the sky above a roughly drawn green tree. "See? Birds!" Logan laughed and tried to copy her simple strokes. His bird came out crooked and clumsy. "It's okay," Ellie consoled him, patting his arm. "You can practice at my house." "I've been drawing since I was a baby." "Since you were 3, Rachel corrected, coming over with 2 mugs of tea and a glass of juice for Ellie. That's when she started holding pencils properly. Logan took the warm mug, his fingers briefly brushing Rachel's. There was more comfort between them now, less tension. The barriers from the beginning, pride, suspicion, social class, hadn't vanished completely, but were lower. "How was your week?" he asked, blowing on the hot tea. Rachel sat on the couch, crossing her legs. "Better. I got some extra hours at the store. And Ellie," she looked lovingly at her daughter, "Ellie's been sleeping better. Fewer nightmares. I'm not afraid of monsters anymore. the little girl announced without looking up from her drawing. Logan said monsters are afraid of brave people like me. Logan smiled, remembering the conversation they'd had the previous week when Ellie confessed she was afraid of the dark. It was strange how simple words could make such a difference. The afternoon passed peacefully, in a way Logan had never experienced before. They drew until they filled several pages of the new sketchbook. Then Logan read aloud a storybook he'd brought on a previous visit, an adventure about a kind-hearted pirate. Ellie listened, fascinated, asking questions at the most exciting parts. Now what? What happens next? We have to turn the page to find out, Logan would reply, deliberately, slowly, savoring her anticipation. As dusk fell, they played a memory card game Logan had bought just for her. Big cards, easy to flip. To his surprise, Ellie beat him easily. "You let me win," she accused, frowning. "I did not," Logan protested, genuinely impressed by her memory. "You're just really good. Mommy and I play it all the time," Ellie explained, arranging the cards for another round. "It's our favorite game, isn't it, Mom?" Rachel, who'd returned to the kitchen to make a simple dinner, nodded. Ellie's memory is amazing. She remembers details I've already forgotten. "Like the color of the shirt you were wearing when you fell off your bike," Ellie added proudly. A shadow crossed Rachel's face, brief, but Logan noticed. "A bike?" he asked without thinking. Rachel stirred the food on the stove more vigorously than necessary. "An accident. 2 years ago. That's when I got my magic wheels," Ellie said, referring to the wheelchair with a naturalness that squeezed Logan's heart. "Before that, I walked like everyone else. Now I roll, which is more fun." Logan realized they had never openly talked about Ellie's condition. The wheelchair was simply part of her, like her blue eyes or her blonde curls. "You must be the fastest kid at school," he commented lightly. Ellie lowered her eyes. "I don't go to school anymore, not since the accident." Another uncomfortable silence filled the room. Rachel kept stirring the food, more slowly now. "The school didn't have the right setup," she explained, choosing her words carefully. "Then it became impossible to pay tuition." Logan nodded, feeling the weight of that revelation. A bright child like Ellie kept out of school. The cruelty of that hit him hard. "But I have books," Ellie said quickly, pointing to the small shelf in the corner. "And Mommy teaches me letters and numbers. I can count to 100. 200, Rachel corrected with a smile. She learned last week. Dinner was served at the small kitchen table. It was simple, pasta with tomato sauce and some vegetables, but smelled delicious. Logan helped set the table, a task he'd never done at his own home, where staff handled everything. Seated around the tiny table, Logan felt a wave of gratitude and peace. There was no tension, no negotiations, no need to impress or compete. Just 3 people sharing a meal and simple conversation. "This is great," he complimented, tasting the pasta. "Ellie helped with the sauce," Rachel said. "She's learning to cook. Just easy things," Ellie explained. "Mommy won't let me use the knife yet." "Smart choice," Logan agreed, making her laugh. After dinner, while Ellie watched cartoons on TV, Rachel and Logan washed dishes side by side. The counter space was cramped, and their arms occasionally brushed against each other. There was a comfortable intimacy in that shared chore. "Thank you," Rachel said quietly. "So Ellie wouldn't hear. For all this time and for everything you've brought, I know it's not anyone's job to take care of us." Logan dried a plate slowly, choosing his words. "I'm not taking care of you. I'm participating." Rachel glanced sideways at him, her eyes searching his face. "Why?" It was a direct question, deserving an honest answer. Logan took a deep breath. "Because I feel good here. Because Ellie..." He hesitated. "Ellie reminds me that there's more to life than work and money." Rachel continued rinsing the silverware, her face pensive. "It hasn't been easy since she was born," she said at last. "But I've never, not for a second, regretted it. She's the best part of me." Logan nodded, respecting the strength of this woman who faced alone what many, with far more resources, would find impossible. "And after the accident," Rachel went on, "it was like starting over, learning to live in a new way. The school wasn't prepared for a child in a wheelchair. The cost of treatments became too high. I had to leave my job at the store for a while to look after her. When I came back, there was no way to afford school. Her words were simple, without self-pity. Just facts, harsh realities of a world that rarely waits for those who need time. "She's brilliant," Logan commented. "She learns fast." "Yes." Rachel's eyes shone with pride. "If I could, I'd put her in a specialized school. She deserves it. All the opportunities." When Logan finally prepared to leave, the sky was already dark. The rain had stopped, but the air was still damp and cool. "Are you coming back on Tuesday?" Ellie asked, tugging at his sleeve. "I'll come," he promised. "Bring another pirate book?" "If you want." Ellie grinned, showing a gap where a baby tooth had recently fallen out. "You're my big friend," she declared, reaching out her arms for a hug. Logan bent down to hug her, feeling her small arms wrap around his neck, the scent of cheap shampoo and innocence. Something deep stirred inside him. At the door, Rachel saw him out with a grateful smile. She was no longer the distrustful woman he'd first encountered, though she still maintained a natural reserve. "See you Tuesday," she said, driving home, through streets that grew increasingly upscale until he reached his luxury neighborhood. Logan reflected on the contrast in his life. He'd grown up with everything: expensive toys, exclusive schools, international travel. He'd never lacked for anything material. Yet in that small apartment, with a little girl in a wheelchair and a single mother fighting against the odds, he'd found something he hadn't known he was seeking. Authenticity, affection without expectations, the simple joy of making a difference. Life, he thought as he parked in his high-end building's garage, handed out love and suffering so unfairly. Some had everything, except what really mattered. Others struggled for basic needs, but possessed a richness of spirit no bank could quantify. Entering his empty, pristine apartment, he missed the sound of cartoons, the smell of simple pasta, and the embrace of a little girl who called him big friend. For the first time, his life of privilege felt hollow. The decision came to Logan on a Sunday morning, as he drank coffee alone in his penthouse. He was flipping through a business magazine without really reading it, his mind drifting to that small apartment across town, where Ellie was probably drawing at the kitchen table while Rachel cooked a simple breakfast. He put down the magazine, grabbed his phone, and started making calls. The following Tuesday, when he arrived at Rachel and Ellie's apartment, he wasn't alone. Two men accompanied him, carrying a brand new child's wheelchair with bright blue upholstery and wheels that lit up with colorful details. "What's that?" asked Rachel when she opened the door, her face a mixture of surprise and suspicion. Ellie, on the other hand, couldn't contain her excitement. "A new chair, is it for me?" "Is it mine?" Logan nodded, smiling as the men set the chair in the middle of the living room. "I thought you needed one that suited you better. This one has wheels that light up when you move." Ellie wheeled her old chair around the new one, examining it with wide-eyed wonder. "Can I try it?" "Of course," Logan said. "It's all yours." While the delivery guys adjusted the chair to Ellie's size, Rachel pulled Logan aside. "We can't accept this," she whispered. "It's too expensive." Logan had expected that reaction. "It's not a gift, it's a necessity. The old one's worn out and doesn't fit her anymore. This will grow with her for a few years." Rachel opened her mouth to protest again, but Ellie's shout of joy interrupted her. The girl was spinning around the living room in the new chair, the wheel lights flashing as she turned. "Mommy, look how fast it is! And it doesn't squeak in the corners." Rachel's face softened at seeing her daughter so happy. Still, Logan could see the internal struggle in her eyes, pride battling need, independence battling Ellie's well-being. "Thank you," she finally said quietly. "But we just can't." "We can talk about it later," Logan interrupted gently. "Right now, let's just celebrate." That chair was only the beginning. The following week, Logan arrived with an envelope full of papers. "I made some appointments," he announced while Ellie was busy with an educational game he'd brought. "An orthopedic specialist for kids, a physical therapist, and a neurologist." Rachel took the envelope in trembling hands. "Logan, this is..." "It's nothing you wouldn't do if you could," he finished. "I know you're worried about the costs, but please don't be." "I'm doing this because I want to, because I can. And because you both deserve it." Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes, which she quickly wiped away. "Why?" she asked, the same question from weeks ago, but now laden with deeper emotion. Logan looked at Ellie, who giggled while moving brightly colored pieces around the game board. "Because she matters to me. Because you matter to me." In the days that followed, Logan reorganized his life around these two people who had somehow become his gravitational center. He cut back his hours at the office, delegated projects, and filled his schedule with medical appointments and meetings with therapists. Richard Carter, his father, began asking more insistent questions about these distractions, but Logan sidestepped the topic with the skill of someone protecting a treasure. Rachel's pantry was always full now, not just with basics, but with quality items: fresh fruit, varied proteins, organic vegetables. Groceries arrived weekly, discreetly, part of a silent agreement Rachel accepted once she realized it wasn't charity, but genuine care. "Will you stay for dinner?" Ellie asked one afternoon, while Logan helped her with a more complex puzzle they'd bought together. "If your mom invites me," he said, glancing at Rachel as she prepared something that smelled wonderful. "He always stays for dinner now," Rachel remarked with a slight smile. "There's hardly any need to ask." It was true. Lately, Logan spent more evenings in that small apartment than in his own luxurious home. He ate at the laminate kitchen table, helped wash dishes, watched children's movies sitting on the floor next to Ellie's wheelchair. One night, after dinner, Logan pulled a set of colorful cards from his backpack. "What are those?" asked Ellie, curious as always. "A game for us to learn together," he explained, spreading the cards on the living room table. "Each card has a letter, and we need to find words that start with it." It wasn't just a game, and Rachel noticed it immediately. It was a lesson disguised as fun. For airplane," Ellie shouted when she flipped the first card. "That's right, also for ant, apple, adventure," Logan smiled. "Very good, now try this one." He flipped another card showing the letter B. B for ball, bear, baby, balloon. Each new letter revealed Ellie's surprisingly large vocabulary for a 5-year-old who wasn't in school. Soon, the game turned into mini reading sessions, with Logan pointing out simple words in picture books and Ellie trying to identify them. "She learns quickly," Logan told Rachel later, after Ellie had gone to bed. "She's always been like that," Rachel replied with a mix of pride and sadness. "If she could be in school." "She will be," Logan promised. "I'm looking into some options." Rachel didn't argue this time. Something between them had changed. The barrier of pride and independence, though still there, shrank a little more each day. Logan was no longer the wealthy stranger trying to help. He was someone who cared, who was there not out of guilt or obligation, but choice. The improvised lessons continued in the following weeks. Logan brought simple math games, geography puzzles, and books blending stories with basic science concepts. Ellie absorbed it all with a joy and ease that amazed him. "For you'd make a good teacher," Rachel observed one afternoon, watching him patiently explain how planets revolve around the sun to Ellie. "She's just a great student," he replied, though the compliment warmed him inside. It was one of those afternoons, while watching Ellie concentrate on building a small papier-mâché solar system they'd created together, that Logan felt something deep and strange, a feeling he couldn't fully name, a mix of protectiveness, pride, and connection beyond normal friendship or care. He looked at that child with her golden curls falling over blue eyes, so much like his, and felt as if he were caring for someone who had always been his, someone who should always have been under his protection. A bond that transcended the time they had known each other, something almost familial. The feeling both scared and comforted him. He didn't know how to explain it, nor did he want to. He just knew that choosing to stay in the lives of these two people was no longer optional. It was as necessary as breathing. Ellie looked up from her project and smiled at him, a smile full of trust and affection. "I'm done, Logan. Look how pretty it is." "It's perfect," he said, helping her place the little planet Earth in its orbit, exactly as it should be. Night fell softly over the city, wrapping the small apartment in cozy shadows. Ellie had been asleep for almost an hour. Her day had been tiring. with a physical therapy session and then the long afternoon of educational games with Logan. Her new wheelchair rested by the bed, the colorful lights on its wheels finally off. Logan and Rachel sat on the apartment's tiny balcony. It wasn't really a balcony, just a narrow extension big enough for two simple chairs. But from there, they could see the city lights and feel the cool night breeze. They shared a bottle of inexpensive wine in makeshift cups. It wasn't the fancy Bordeaux Logan was used to at business dinners, but it had its own charm. "Thank you for today," Rachel said, swirling the red liquid in her cup. "The physical therapist said he's seeing progress. The exercises are strengthening her muscles." Logan smiled, satisfied. "She's determined. She counts the reps like it's a competition. She's always been like that, stubborn since she was little." Rachel smiled at the memory. When she was only 3, she insisted on dressing herself. It took forever, but she wouldn't accept help. The silence that followed was comfortable. Over the past weeks, they had developed a friendship built on mutual respect and shared love for Ellie. It wasn't romantic, at least not overtly, but there was a slowly growing intimacy. "Can I ask you something?" Logan broke the silence, his tone more serious. Rachel nodded, taking another sip of wine. "Ellie's dad. You never talk about him." She tensed, her fingers tightening around the cup. For a moment, Logan thought he'd crossed an invisible line. "I'm sorry, it's none of my business," he backtracked. "No, it's okay." Rachel took a deep breath. "I guess you deserve to know after all you've done for us." She glanced at the slightly open door to the bedroom, making sure Ellie was really asleep. "It's not a pretty story." Logan waited silently, giving her room to speak at her own pace. "6 years ago, I worked as a secretary at a big corporation," she began, her voice low but steady. "Carter Enterprises. Have you heard of it?" Logan felt his stomach clench. "Yes," he answered, trying to keep his voice neutral. "I know it well. I was in the legal department. I just graduated with a business degree, but jobs were scarce, so I took the secretary position to get some experience." Rachel paused, gazing at the city beyond the narrow balcony. "The pay was good. The people were mostly nice. I thought I could grow in the company, maybe eventually land a better role." She took another sip of wine, as if seeking courage. "Then I met him, the owner of the company. I was filling in for his executive assistant for a few weeks while she was on medical leave." A bitter smile crossed her lips. "He was charming, powerful, the kind of man who walks into a room and everyone notices. You know how that is." Logan knew exactly how that was. He had grown up watching his father wield that kind of influence over people. At first, it was just smiles, friendly comments, then invitations to lunch to discuss my future at the company. I knew it was wrong. He was married, much older, but she shrugged. I was young and impressionable, and he was persuasive. "You got involved," Logan concluded, feeling a knot tighten in his throat. "For a few months, always in secret, always with promises that he'd separate from his wife, that we had a future." Rachel gave a humorless laugh. "Oldest story in the book, right?" And I fell for it like an idiot. Logan wanted to say something, anything to comfort her, but no words came. Part of him already knew where this story would end, and his heart pounded harder against his ribs. Then someone found out, probably one of the other assistants. Rumors spread fast. Rachel straightened in her chair, as if gathering her strength. "On a Friday, I was called into HR. They said they were letting me go for incompatibility with the company culture. No mention of the affair, no direct accusation, just a severance check and instructions to leave quietly." "And him?" Logan could barely form the question. "I never saw him again." Rachel shook her head slowly. "Not a phone call, not an email. He disappeared from my life as if we'd never existed." Logan felt a wave of shame and anger rise within him. "And when you found out about Ellie?" 2 weeks later, the positive pregnancy test felt like a slap in the face. There I was, jobless, without references, because obviously nobody at Carter Enterprises would recommend me, and pregnant by a man who wouldn't even pick up the phone. She breathed deeply, her eyes on the city lights. I thought about telling him. I even went to the building once, but security wouldn't let me in. I guess they had specific orders. So you decided to go it alone? Logan asked, his admiration for her growing with every word. Rachel nodded. What else could I do? An abortion was out of the question for me, and I wasn't going to force a man to be a father against his will. If he didn't even want to talk to me, what kind of dad would he be? You never tried to get child support, any financial help, and fight his expensive lawyers, show up in newspapers as the secretary who got pregnant by the boss. She shook her head. It wasn't worth the humiliation. I kept my dignity, found another job, more modest. My mother, who passed away 3 years ago, helped me in the beginning, and we moved on. Logan observed her profile in the dim light. The strength of this woman impressed him more every moment, raising a daughter alone, going through an accident, illness, financial struggles, and still holding on to her dignity, love, and hope. Does Ellie know? He asked softly. Just that her dad was too busy to meet us. I didn't want her growing up feeling rejected or thinking she did something wrong. Rachel sighed. When she's older, I'll tell her more. In a way she can handle. Logan felt the weight of his next words before speaking them. What was his name? Rachel hesitated. When she spoke, her voice was nearly a whisper. Richard Carter. Even though he expected that answer, hearing his father's name hit Logan with physical force. It was as if the world had stopped spinning for a moment. Everything made sense now. The familiarity he felt when looking at Ellie, her blue eyes identical to his, that inexplicable sense of connection from the very first moment in the rain. Ellie was his sister. The sound of his own breathing seemed deafening. Rachel watched him, not sensing the storm raging inside him. Do you know him? She asked, interpreting his reaction as mere surprise. He's famous in business circles, I imagine. Logan swallowed hard. Part of him wanted to reveal everything right then, to say Richard Carter was his father, that Ellie was his half-sister, that all these months he'd been guided by some force of fate he couldn't understand. But another part, more cautious, held him back. How would Rachel react? Would she think he'd sought them out on purpose? That all his actions were fueled by guilt or a scheme to protect his father's name? I've heard of him, he finally said, struggling to keep his voice steady. And of the company. Rachel seemed uninterested in delving further. For her, Richard Carter was a closed chapter, though its consequences lived on. I never regretted Ellie, she said, turning to look him in the eye. Even on the hardest days and when I didn't know how to pay rent or buy her medicine, never, not for a second, did I regret her. She's perfect. Logan nodded, speechless. He thought about his father, the respected man, the brilliant businessman, the occasional philanthropist who appeared at charity events with Logan's mother, the man who had abandoned a pregnant woman without looking back, who had a daughter, a wonderful daughter like Ellie, and never cared to meet her. He thought about himself, growing up clueless about this, privileged, protected. How could he have a sister living in such different circumstances? The injustice of it all weighed heavily on him. It's late, Rachel said, standing up. And you look tired. Are you sure you don't want to crash on the couch? It's almost midnight. Logan shook his head, regaining some composure. No, I should go. I have some things to handle early tomorrow. They said goodbye at the door, Rachel thanking him yet again for all he'd done for Ellie that day. If she noticed anything off about him, she didn't mention it. On the way to his car, Logan felt like he was carrying a massive weight. Each step was a conscious effort. When he finally got inside the vehicle, he didn't start the engine right away. He just sat there in the dark, trying to process what he had learned. Ellie was his sister, and his father, the man he'd always admired and tried to emulate, had abandoned his own daughter without a second thought. He drove home on autopilot, his mind filled with images and questions. He saw Ellie's face, her smiles, her small hands drawing, her determination in physical therapy. He saw Rachel, her quiet strength and dignity, her unconditional love. And he saw his father in board meetings, at formal dinners, on business trips, living as though those two people did not exist. That night, Logan couldn't sleep. He sat in his home office, the city lights outside, and made a decision. He needed to know more. He needed to confirm what his heart already knew to be true. The next morning, using his privileges as the company's vice president, Logan gained access to personnel records from the legal department 6 years prior. The excuse was an internal audit on employee turnover. The files confirmed it all. Rachel Evans had been hired as a junior secretary in the legal department in January 6 years ago. In April of that year, she had been temporarily assigned to replace Richard Carter's executive assistant. By July, she was abruptly dismissed with a large severance and a confidentiality agreement. Logan even found an email from the head of HR to his father, mentioning the situation with Ms. Evans and assuring him everything was handled discreetly. No explicit details, but the evasive language said enough. The dates matched perfectly. If Ellie was 5 now, that meant Rachel was in the early stages of pregnancy when she was fired, probably without even knowing. The anger Logan felt was visceral. His father hadn't just had an affair with an employee, bad enough in itself, but he'd discarded her as soon as things got complicated. And later, when he could have taken responsibility for his daughter, he'd chosen cowardice. Along with the anger, Logan felt a sense of responsibility. It wasn't his fault, but somehow it felt like it was. As if the universe had led him to that rainy street months ago, so he could right a wrong his father had committed. Ellie deserved more. Rachel deserved more. Closing the digital files and taking a deep breath, Logan made his second decision of the day. He would confront his father. Not just for himself, not just to vent his anger, but for Ellie, his innocent sister who deserved acknowledgement, support and love from her real father. The conversation wouldn't be easy, but it had to happen. Leaving the company that afternoon, his heart pounded with determination and apprehension. Richard Carter's office occupied the entire top floor of Carter Enterprises. Glass walls offered a panoramic view of the city, a constant reminder of the power and influence he'd cultivated over decades. The massive mahogany desk, the paintings by famous artists, and the minimalist yet luxurious decor all cemented the image of unshakable success. Logan had known that setting since he was a child. How many times had he visited his father there, always a mixture of admiration and intimidation. He'd grown up hearing others call his father a visionary, a business genius. Richard Carter was not just his dad, he was an institution, a role model, a legacy to uphold, or so Logan had thought until now. The secretary, a middle-aged woman, efficient and discreet, announced Logan's arrival over the intercom. Seconds later, the double doors swung open. "Logan!" Richard smiled, rising to greet him. "What a pleasant surprise. We didn't schedule anything, did we?" "No," Logan said, closing the door behind him. "We need to talk." Something in Logan's voice made Richard's smile waver slightly. He knew his son well enough to see this wasn't a trivial matter. Of course. Sit down. Want a drink?" He gestured toward the bar in the corner of the office. "No, thanks." Logan stayed standing, studying his father. Richard Carter was 59 but looked younger. Tall like his son, he stayed fit with regular tennis and golf sessions. His hair, once the same brown as Logan's, was streaked with grey in a way that added to his aura of authority. He wore a flawlessly tailored suit, a silk tie, and gold cufflinks. The perfect man, the model businessman, the respectable citizen. A sham. "I'm worried about you," Richard began, sitting down and gesturing once more for Logan to do the same. "You've been missing important meetings, delegating critical projects. Your mother mentioned she hardly sees you at family dinners. Is something wrong? Woman troubles, perhaps?" Finally, Logan took a seat, not for comfort, but to look his father directly in the eye. "Do you know a woman named Rachel Evans?" The question, blunt and without preamble, caused an almost imperceptible reaction in Richard, a slight stiffening of the shoulders, a slower blink. To anyone else, it would have gone unnoticed. But Logan knew his father's micro-expressions. Richard furrowed his brow, as if rifling through his memory. Evans, the name isn't entirely unfamiliar. A former employee, perhaps. The feigned hesitation made Logan boil. "Don't play dumb with me, Dad. Rachel Evans, a secretary in the legal department 6 years ago. Then your temporary assistant. Ring a bell now." Richard leaned back in his chair. his face shutting down into a mask of professional caution. Yes, I recall now. There was an incident. She was terminated. What about her? An incident. Logan practically spat the word. That's what you call it. An incident. Richard sighed, like someone dealing with a minor, annoying problem. Logan, I'm a busy man. If you have something to say, just say it. Has this woman approached you with some story? No, she didn't approach me. Logan took a deep breath, restraining his anger. He couldn't lose control now. He needed to keep a clear head if he wanted what he'd come for. I met Rachel by chance a few months ago. She doesn't know who I am. I mean, she knows my name, but not that I'm your son. Richard frowned, not yet seeing where this was going. And she has a daughter, a 5-year-old girl. Her name is Ellie. The silence that followed was heavy. Richard didn't move, didn't blink, didn't react. He simply watched his son with calculating eyes. I see, he said finally, his voice neutral. And you believe this child? It's not a matter of belief, Logan cut him off. Ellie is your daughter. She has the same blue eyes as me and you. The same face shape. And the dates match perfectly. Rachel was fired in July 6 years ago. Ellie is 5 years and 3 months old. Richard stood up slowly and walked over to the window. With his back to his son, he looked out over the city below. Even if that's true, what do you expect me to do now after all this time? The coldness of his question hit Logan like a punch. There was no denial. That was a relief, at least. But there was no remorse either, no sense of responsibility. I expect you to do what's right, Logan answered, keeping his voice steady. Take responsibility as her father. Richard turned around, a cynical smile on his lips. As her father, Logan, be realistic. I had an affair with this woman, yes. It was a mistake. She was attractive, available, and I was bored. Bored? Logan nearly choked on the word. You were married to my mother. After 30 years of marriage, you'll understand when— Don't you dare! Logan stood, his face flushed with anger. Don't you dare use that as an excuse. Richard raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. All right, it was a mistake, I admit it. Once I found out, I made sure she received adequate compensation and moved on. It was a fair deal. Fair? Logan laughed bitterly. You fired her when the affair was discovered, then completely ignored her. She tried to talk to you when she found out she was pregnant, but security kept her out. Did you know that? A flicker of something, maybe guilt, maybe just discomfort, crossed Richard's face. I gave general orders to keep certain people from direct access to me, to avoid complications. Complications? Logan shook his head, disgusted. That's how you see your own daughter. As a complication? Richard returned to his desk, sitting down with the posture of someone negotiating a tough deal. Logan, be practical. If this girl is really my daughter, and I'm not denying the possibility, what good does it do to show up in her life now? She's already 5. She has a mother, a life. My presence would only complicate everything. It's not about your presence, Logan replied, controlling his voice. It's about your responsibility. Ellie had an accident 2 years ago. She's in a wheelchair. She needs treatments, special equipment, and adapted education. Rachel works 2 jobs to support them and still struggles to pay rent. Mentioning the accident finally seemed to hit a nerve with Richard. His face hardened, but his eyes revealed unease. An accident? She was hit by a car. Spinal cord injury. The doctors aren't sure if she'll ever walk again. Richard got up again, this time heading for the bar. He poured himself a whiskey, took a sip, then faced his son. What exactly do you want me to do, Logan? Give them money. The bluntness made Logan feel sick, but it was precisely why he had come. Not for himself or Rachel, but for Ellie, a child who deserved far more than life had given her. I want you to take financial responsibility for your daughter, full medical care, a private school equipped for her needs, a better apartment in a safer neighborhood, financial security for her future, college, ongoing treatments, whatever she needs. Richard gave a humorless laugh. So basically, you want me to open my bank account to this woman I barely know and a child I've never met? Logan stepped closer, fixing his eyes on his father's. I'm asking you to do the bare minimum for your daughter. The bare minimum, Dad. I'm not even talking about emotional support, love, the presence every child deserves. I'm talking about money, the only thing you really seem to value. His words struck Richard like arrows. He placed the glass on the desk with unnecessary force. Watch your tone, son. You have no idea about value, about responsibility. You were born with a silver spoon, got everything you ever wanted, and now you dare lecture me. I'm asking you to be the man you pretended to be my whole life, Logan shot back without flinching. The man of integrity, the leader, the example. Or was that also a sham? They stared at each other in silence for several long seconds. The tension was palpable, a clash of generations, father and son, old values versus new, selfishness versus responsibility. Finally, Richard sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. What if I refuse? He asked, but his tone already hinted at defeat. Logan didn't hesitate. Then I'll go to court. As Ellie's legal guardian, I can demand a DNA test and child support. It'll be public, scandalous, your name, your reputation, your marriage, all on the line. Is that what you want? It was a bluff. Logan would never subject Rachel and Ellie to that public scrutiny. But his father didn't need to know. Richard studied his son for a moment as though seeing him for the first time. Anger flashed in his eyes. But so did something like respect. You truly care about them, he said at last, not as a question but a statement. Yes. Logan's answer was simple and direct. Richard walked to his desk, sat down, and opened his laptop. What are your specific demands? Logan felt cautious relief. He had won the first battle, though the war was far from over. Their trust fund for Ellie, controlled by Rachel until she's of age, lifetime medical coverage, including treatments and equipment, a home of their own, in a neighborhood with good schools, and monthly support for Rachel, for the work she's done raising your daughter alone all these years. Richard typed some notes, his face unreadable. Figures. I'll leave that to your judgment. Be generous, Dad. For the first time in your life, be generous without expecting anything in return. After more discussion of practical details, Richard shut the laptop. My lawyers will draft the documents, but I have one condition. Logan had expected that. His father never yielded without imposing his own terms. Absolute discretion. This must never go public. For the sake of my family, my reputation. For the sake of your family, Logan repeated bitterly. Ellie is your family. You know what I mean. I do. Logan got to his feet. Rachel wants privacy too. She never wanted a scandal or publicity. She just wants the best for her daughter. Something like guilt flickered across Richard's face. She sounds like a good mother. The best Ellie could have. Logan headed for the door, but paused. I'm going to set up an independent trust too, separate from yours, to make sure that no matter what happens, Ellie and Rachel are protected. Richard nodded slowly. As you wish. Logan opened the door, then turned back one last time. One more thing, Dad. Understand this, I didn't do it for you or to protect our family name. I did it for Ellie, and I'm going to remain in her life, not as her brother yet, but as a friend. Someone she can always count on. Richard regarded his son for a long moment. You're a better man than I am, Logan, he said at last, his voice almost a whisper. You always were. Logan didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. He left the office feeling exhausted but determined. At the reception desk, the secretary gave him a curious look, but he just nodded and kept walking. Outside, the city carried on with its frenetic pace, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded at the top of that skyscraper. Logan breathed in the fresh air, feeling a huge weight lift from his shoulders. He had faced his father, the man he had both feared and admired all his life. Surprisingly, he didn't feel destroyed or lost. He felt stronger, more grounded. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to Rachel. Can I drop by today? I have news. As he waited on the sidewalk for a cab, Logan thought of Ellie, her bright blue eyes, her brave smile, her determination. His sister. Her life would change now. Not abruptly or dramatically, but in meaningful ways. Better doctors, better treatments, better opportunities. When the cab pulled up, Logan got in and gave the address of his trusted attorney. There was much to do to ensure his father's promises became a legal reality, and beyond that, he needed to set up his own fund for Ellie, independent, secure, lasting. It wasn't just about money. It was a silent promise to a sister who still didn't know he was her brother. A promise that, no matter what happened, she would never be alone again. Changes began quietly at Rachel and Ellie's apartment. First came the medical consultations with specialists who had open appointments, then the specialized private school that offered scholarships for exceptional kids, the new power wheelchair for Ellie, the physical therapy equipment, the latest medications, everything materializing as if the universe had suddenly decided to smile upon them. Rachel wasn't naive. She knew there was something behind these coincidences and opportunities, but Logan always deflected her questions. "I have some connections," he'd say. "Don't worry about that right now." She accepted it because she saw her daughter smiling more, sleeping better, thriving with the new support. The doctor even hinted at the possibility of partial mobility recovery with the new treatment. More than Rachel had ever dared hope. One Saturday afternoon, the apartment was unusually quiet. Ellie had gone to her first adaptive swimming lesson, accompanied by Mrs. Brenda, who'd offered to take her while Rachel rested her persistent cold. Rachel took advantage of the rare solitude to organize some papers. Among them was a large envelope that had arrived the previous week, addressed to her from a law firm. It contained the documents for a trust fund established in Ellie's name, a generous fund guaranteeing her education, medical care and well-being until adulthood and beyond. Logan had explained briefly, some anonymous benefactor who'd heard their story and wanted to help. Rachel knew there was more to it, but she hadn't pressed for details yet. She trusted Logan enough to believe nothing shady was involved. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was too early for Ellie to be back. "Logan," she exclaimed in surprise upon opening the door. "I thought you were coming later for dinner." He looked different, tenser, less relaxed than usual. He carried a leather folder under his arm and wasn't smiling as he entered. "We need to talk," he said, looking around. "Ellie's not here. She's at swimming practice with Mrs. Brenda. They'll be back in about an hour." Logan nodded, seeming both relieved and more nervous. "That's good. What I have to say, I need to tell you first." Rachel felt a tightness in her chest. In recent months, she'd developed a kind of sixth sense for Logan's expressions. She recognized his smiles and worries, how he frowned when something troubled him. Right now, he looked resolute, like someone who'd made a difficult decision. "Did something happen?" she asked, pouring water for both of them at the small kitchen table. "You look worried." Logan sat, placing the folder gently on the table. "Rachel, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have said a long time ago." She sat too, anxiety building. "You're scaring me. That's not my intention." He took a deep breath, his blue eyes locked on hers. "Rachel, do you remember the first time you told me about Ellie's dad?" She nodded. "Of course, on the balcony, a few months ago." "You told me his name." "Richard Carter," Rachel confirmed, still unsure where this was headed. "Why?" Logan opened the folder slowly and removed a photograph. It was a formal family picture, an older man with graying hair in a suit, a refined blonde woman by his side, and a teenage boy in the middle, maybe 16, everyone smiling, posed, perfectly arranged. Rachel looked at it curiously until her gaze settled on the boy. Even younger, he was unmistakable. It was Logan. Her eyes then darted to the older man and shock washed over her. The same eyes, the same face shape, older, sterner, but undeniably similar to Logan. "That's," her voice faltered. "Richard Carter. My father," Logan said, his tone low but steady. "Rachel, I'm his son. Ellie is my half-sister." Rachel felt as if the floor had dropped from beneath her. The implications of that revelation hit her like a wave. Logan, the man who'd entered her life months ago, helped Ellie become part of their small world, was the son of the man who'd abandoned her when she was pregnant. "You..." She tried to speak, but words failed. "I didn't know," Logan said quickly. "That first day in the rain, I had no idea who you were. It was a coincidence or fate. Call it what you will. I only found out when you told me on the balcony that night." Rachel stood up abruptly, stepping away from the table. She needed space, air. Her mind spun, trying to process everything. "All this time," she murmured, turning to face him. "All this time you knew and said nothing." It wasn't an accusation, just a statement. Logan stood as well, but kept his distance, respecting her need for space. "Yes, and I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you sooner, but..." "But what, Logan?" The initial shock gave way to a deep sadness. "Why didn't you trust me? Were you checking if I was some scammer? Trying to protect your father?" "No." The intensity of his voice startled her. "I never thought that of you, not for a second. And about my father." He shook his head with a bitter smile. "I wasn't interested in protecting him. He doesn't deserve protection." Rachel folded her arms, trying to calm herself. "Then why? Why not tell me?" Logan looked down at his hands for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "Because I didn't want to be another man who used you to ease his own conscience." The honesty in those words hit her unexpectedly. "In the beginning," he continued, "I was in shock. I didn't know how to react. Then, when I realized what my father had done, I wanted to fix it. But I was afraid. Afraid you'd think everything, every visit, every bit of help, every moment with Ellie, was driven by guilt or obligation. And it wasn't, Rachel." His eyes sought hers, desperate for her to understand. "It was never about guilt. It was because you two became important to me, in a way I can't even explain." Rachel slowly sat again, her legs weak. The sincerity in his words was undeniable, but the weight of the revelation still stunned her. "All these things," she said, pointing to the documents on the table, "all these coincidences, the doctors, the school, the fund for Ellie, that was your father." Logan nodded. "Yes and no. I confronted him, demanded he take responsibility, at least financially. He resisted, but he eventually agreed. The resources are his, but the fund is under your control, independent of him. He can't interfere or withdraw the money." "So he knows about Ellie?" It wasn't a question. "Yes, but he doesn't want personal involvement, and I didn't push it. I thought that decision should be yours and, later on, Ellie's when she's older." Rachel covered her face with her hands for a moment, trying to organize her thoughts. When she looked at Logan again, there was no anger, just deep exhaustion. "Why now? Why tell me now?" Logan sat, looking serious. "Because you're about to move into the new apartment. Because Ellie's improving with her treatments. Because everything's changing, and I couldn't let us build something new on top of a secret this big." He paused, his eyes locked on hers. "And because Ellie deserves to know who I really am, when she's ready. She deserves to know I'm not just her big friend, I'm her brother." The silence that followed was heavy, but not hostile. Rachel looked again at the photo on the table. The resemblance between Ellie and Logan was obvious now. Same eyes, same smile. "You look more like him than you'd like," she said at last, with a sad little smile. "Only on the outside, I hope," Logan replied, serious. Rachel took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "I need to ask, did you plan all this from the start? Since that day in the rain?" "No." His answer came quickly, firmly. That day was pure chance. But now, looking back, it feels like it was meant to happen. You know? Like some greater force put us on that street, in that rain, at exactly that time. Rachel nodded slowly. As irrational as it sounded, she understood that feeling. "I'm angry," she admitted, surprising even herself with her honesty. "But not at you. I'm angry because Richard Carter still affects my life. Even after all these years, I've tried to leave him behind." "I understand." Logan waited in respectful silence. "But I'm also grateful," she went on, words coming more easily now. "If none of this had happened, Ellie wouldn't have the treatment she has, or the new school, or..." She looked at Logan, her gaze softening. "Or you." The relief in his face was visible. "So, you don't want me to go?" The question caught her off guard. "Go. Why would you leave? I thought maybe after learning the truth you wouldn't want to see me. That it'd be too painful. A constant reminder." Rachel shook her head slowly. "Logan, these past months you've become part of Ellie's life in a way I can't even explain. She adores you. And you? She paused, searching for the right words. You're not your father. You never were. You chose to be here, to be part of her life. That means everything. Tears shone in both their eyes, unspilled. We'll have to tell her eventually, Rachel said pensively, that you're her brother. Whenever you think it's the right time, Logan agreed. No rush. The sound of the front door opening cut their conversation short. Ellie rolled in on her wheelchair, hair still damp from the pool, her face glowing with happiness. Ms. Brenda followed, carrying a small swim bag. Logan, Ellie shouted upon seeing him, spinning her chair in his direction. You won't believe it. I floated all by myself. So the teacher said I have natural talent. Logan bent down to hug her, his eyes meeting Rachel's over the child's shoulder. A silent understanding passed between them. The truth would wait. This was a moment to celebrate. That's amazing, Ellie. I knew you could do it. Miss Brenda watched the scene with her calm, observant gaze. When Logan looked up, he found her eyes on him. Something in her expression told him she might have known all along, or at least suspected. She gave him a slight nod, almost imperceptible, before heading to the kitchen for snacks. It was as if she were saying, "It's all right, things are as they should be." That night over dinner, the atmosphere had changed. Not obviously or dramatically, but with a new layer of honesty and acceptance. Rachel watched Logan and Ellie excitedly discuss the swim lesson, seeing clearly now the shared traits, the strong bond that went beyond friendship. When Logan finally left late that night, Rachel walked him to the door. "Thank you," she said simply, "for doing things differently." Logan understood what she meant, choosing to be present, to take on a responsibility that wasn't originally his, to love Ellie unconditionally. "Always," he replied, and it was a promise. Watching from the window as Logan got into his car, Rachel felt an unfamiliar peace. The past couldn't be changed, and Richard Carter would always be a shadow in her story. But the future, for the first time in a long while, looked bright and full of possibilities. Ellie had a brother now, and Rachel was no longer alone. "Are you sure it's not too much?" Rachel asked, standing in the entryway of a spacious apartment. Sunlight poured in through the large windows, highlighting the polished wooden floors and freshly painted pale blue walls. Logan smiled, holding out the key he just handed her. "It's not too much. It's exactly what you need." The apartment was on the 4th floor of a modern building in a peaceful neighborhood. It had 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a spacious kitchen and, most importantly, wide corridors and doorways, perfectly adapted for Ellie's wheelchair. There was even a small elevator, eliminating the staircase problem that had plagued them in their old place. "Mom, come see my room." Ellie's excited voice echoed down the hall. She maneuvered her chair skillfully through the open space, clearly delighted by the freedom of movement. Rachel followed her daughter, still absorbing the reality of their new situation. Ellie's room was bright and cheerful, with a view of a small park. Someone, Logan, she guessed, had decorated the walls with colorful stickers of planets and stars, reminding her of the solar system they'd built together months earlier. "Look, there's room for all my books," Ellie announced, pointing to a low bookshelf within easy reach of her chair. "And the bed's higher, just like the doctor said would be better for me." Rachel ran a hand over Ellie's hair, unable to contain her emotions at the sight of her daughter's joy. For years, they'd lived in cramped, inadequate spaces, watching Ellie struggle not just with physical limitations, but with an environment that worked against her. Now, finally, the space worked in her favor. "It's perfect, honey," she agreed, her voice slightly shaky. Logan stood in the doorway, a discreet smile on his face. Over the past few weeks, since revealing he was Richard's son, their relationship had changed. There was more honesty, more vulnerability, and surprisingly more trust. "We still have to unpack your things," he said, stepping into the room. "But I figured you'd want to decide where everything goes." "Can I choose where each thing goes?" Ellie asked, eyes shining with possibility. "Of course," Logan assured her. "It's your space." While Ellie began chattering about where she'd place each of her belongings, Rachel and Logan returned to the living room. "You thought of everything," she remarked, noting the adapted details everywhere. lowered counters in the kitchen, light switches within wheelchair reach, doors with no thresholds that could hinder Ellie's chair. "I consulted accessibility specialists," Logan explained. "I wanted it to be functional, not just pretty." Rachel nodded, walking to the window. The neighborhood was quiet and green, with a school visible a few blocks away. She knew it had a well-regarded inclusion program for children with special needs. "I'm starting to feel bad for saying thank you so often," she said, turning to face him. "But I don't know what else to say." Logan stepped closer, stopping at a respectful distance. "You don't have to say anything. Seeing Ellie so happy, that's all that matters." The moving trucks arrived soon after, bringing the few belongings they'd kept from the old apartment along with many new items. Rachel had insisted on bringing some sentimental pieces: the small kitchen table where Ellie had drawn her first pictures, the armchair where she read stories to her every night, photos and trinkets that told the story of their life together. The next hours were a whirlwind of activity. Miss Brenda showed up to help, bringing sandwiches and drinks for everyone. Though she no longer worked at their old building, she remained a steady presence in their lives, like an honorary aunt to Ellie and a loyal friend to Rachel. "This place has good energy," the older woman declared, helping organize the kitchen. "You're going to be happy here." By the end of the day, exhausted but pleased, they all sat in the dining area to share a pizza. Ellie chatted excitedly about her plans for her new room, her upcoming start at a new school, and the more frequent swim lessons she'd have now. "And the best part is you can visit more often, Logan," she said between bites. "You won't have to climb those annoying stairs." Logan smiled. "That's true. And now there's plenty of room to spread out all our projects." While Ellie and Mrs. Brenda chatted, Logan noticed Rachel watching them with a thoughtful expression. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded slowly. "It's strange. For the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe. Actually breathe, without that constant pressure in my chest." She met his gaze. "It's a good feeling. Scary, but good." Logan understood. For years, Rachel had lived in constant alert mode, always worried about the next rent payment, the next medication, the next crisis. Now, with financial security and an apartment adapted to Ellie's needs, she could finally let her guard down, at least a little. "It'll take time to get used to," he said. "But you deserve this, Rachel. You both do." Over the following weeks, a new life took shape. Ellie started at her new school, where a specialized team helped her both academically and through integrated physical therapy. She came home brimming with stories of new friends and adapted activities that allowed her to participate fully. The new apartment filled with life. Plants in the windows, Ellie's drawings on the walls, books on the shelves. Rachel, with more free time now that she no longer needed 2 jobs, enrolled in an online course to update her professional skills. For the first time in years, she could envision her own future, not just day-to-day survival. Logan visited regularly, always bringing something new for Ellie: a book, an educational game, or a new project idea. Their relationship blossomed naturally. Though they hadn't yet told Ellie the truth about him being her brother, their bond was undeniable to anyone who saw them together. One afternoon, while Ellie proudly demonstrated some physical therapy exercises she could do on her own, Logan received an unexpected message. It was from his father. "We need to talk," it said succinctly. The next day, in his office, Richard Carter looked different from the arrogant man Logan had confronted months earlier. There was something in his eyes, a restlessness, a vulnerability Logan had rarely seen. "How are they?" Richard asked, without preamble. "They're doing well," Logan answered cautiously. "Ellie started her new school. She loves it." Richard nodded, drumming his fingers on the desk. "I got a report from the doctors. They say she's responding well to treatment." "Yes. There's even some hope for partial mobility recovery, with time and intensive therapy." An uncomfortable silence filled the space. Richard stood up, moving to the window, something Logan recognized as a sign of significant news to come. "I'd like to meet her," Richard said at last, his voice lower than usual. "Ellie, if Rachel agrees, of course." The request surprised Logan. In all their previous talks, Richard had made it clear he wanted to keep his distance, offering only financial support. "What changed?" Logan asked, suspicious. Richard turned to face him. "I saw the photos you sent the doctor. She has your smile. The one you had when you were a child." Logan waited, sensing there was more. "I never wanted more children beyond you," Richard continued. "Your mother had complications giving birth to you, and we decided one child was enough." He paused. "But now, there's this girl out there, my daughter, and I can't stop thinking about her." Logan studied his father carefully, looking for signs of manipulation or deceit. Surprisingly, he found none. "I'll talk to Rachel," he said at last, "but I can't promise anything. It's her call." Rachel reacted exactly as Logan expected, with caution and distrust. "Why?" she asked, after the kids who'd visited Ellie for a welcome party had gone home. "Why now, after all this time?" Logan relayed what Richard had told him, watching her closely. "I don't know if I can trust him," Rachel admitted. "Not after everything." "I get it," Logan said gently. "If you say no, he has to respect it." Rachel gazed out the window at the park where Ellie would soon have adaptive PE classes. Her world had changed so much in such a short time. Her daughter was happy, healthy, full of new opportunities. Part of that, tough as it was to admit, was because of Richard Carter. "I'll think about it," she finally said. "But on my terms." "Lots of terms," Logan nodded. "That's fair." That night, while tucking Ellie into bed, Rachel looked at her daughter's sleepy face and saw the features she now recognized: Logan's eyes, the Carter's smile. She also saw her own strength and determination mirrored there. "Mom," Ellie murmured, half asleep, "this is the best room in the whole world." Rachel smiled, kissing her forehead. "It is, my love, the best in the whole world." And for the first time in a long while, she truly believed the future would be better than the past. The rain returned on a Sunday afternoon, 6 months after their first meeting. It wasn't a violent storm like before, just a thin, steady drizzle that fogged the windows and created gentle swirls in the puddles. Ellie watched the drops slide down the glass of her new bedroom, tracing their winding paths with her finger. Her morning therapy session had been intense, and she was resting in her chair, a blanket over her legs. Logan was in the living room with Rachel, speaking in low voices about Richard's upcoming visit the following week. "Mom," Ellie called, rolling into the living room. "It's raining just like that day." Rachel looked up from the papers she was reviewing with Logan. "Which day, sweetheart?" "The day Logan saved me in the rain," Ellie answered, turning those bright blue eyes so like Logan's on him. "Can we go back to that diner again? The one with the yummy pancakes?" Logan and Rachel exchanged glances. There was something special about her request, a link to the moment that had changed their lives forever. "Rose's Diner," Logan recalled the red neon sign. "Sure, if your mom agrees." Rachel hesitated only a second. "Why not? Sounds like a good plan for a rainy Sunday." "Can I wear my new blue dress?" Ellie asked, referring to the gift Ms. Brenda had recently given her. "Of course," Rachel said, getting up. "Let's get ready." 30 minutes later, they were driving across town in Logan's car. Ellie wore a navy blue dress dotted with white stars and a headband that pulled back her golden curls. She looked older, stronger than the frightened little girl Logan had found on that first rainy night. The diner was exactly the same. The neon sign, the Formica tables, the aroma of fresh coffee and frying grease. As they entered, the doorbell tinkled, and a few regular patrons turned to look. "Table for 3, the waitress asked, a different woman than before. "Yes, please," Logan replied. "By the window, if possible." By some miracle, the same table they'd had months ago was free. Logan helped position Ellie's chair, and Rachel sat beside her. The familiarity of the place, combined with how much their lives had changed, gave the moment a surreal quality. "It seems smaller," Rachel commented, glancing around. "Places always seem smaller when we return," Logan said. "It's like we grow, but they stay the same." "I grew 2 inches since that day," Ellie chimed in proudly. "The school nurse measured me." Logan smiled. "See? That's why the diner seems smaller." They ordered pancakes just like they had that first night. Ellie insisted on hot chocolate, even though it was late spring. Some traditions were meant to be kept. As they ate, the conversation flowed naturally. Ellie talked about her new school, new friends, and how her teacher praised her drawing of the solar system. Rachel mentioned her online course, the fresh career prospects opening up for her. Logan listened, commented, and laughed, but there was something in his eyes, a quiet decision, a moment he'd been waiting for. Rachel noticed. Over the months, she'd learned to read Logan's expressions like an open book. They had talked the night before about telling Ellie the truth. They'd agreed it was time, that she was ready. But they hadn't decided how or when. "Enjoying the pancakes?" asked the waitress, approaching to refill their cups. "They're the best," Ellie declared, her face slightly sticky with syrup. "Just like last time." The waitress smiled and walked away. Rachel took a napkin and gently wiped Ellie's cheek. The simple, motherly gesture tugged at Logan's heart. "You know what I remember about that day," Ellie said, looking out the window at the light drizzle. "I remember you were all wet, Logan, and you had a funny look on your face when you saw me." "Funny how?" he asked, genuinely curious. Ellie frowned, thinking, "Like you already knew me but couldn't remember from where." That simple yet profound observation took Logan by surprise. Even at 5, Ellie saw more than many adults did. "You're very perceptive, you know that," he said, reaching for her hand across the table. Rachel watched them in silence. Her life had changed so much since that night. She'd gone from a single mum fighting the world to someone with support, security, real hope for the future. It wasn't just the money, though it helped. It was the presence, the genuine care, the love Logan had brought into their lives. When they finished eating, Logan paid, leaving a generous tip. Outside, the rain had picked up slightly. They were about to dash to the car when Logan stopped. "Wait," he said, his tone suddenly serious. "Before we go, there's something I need to say." Rachel nodded, understanding what was coming. She moved aside a bit, giving them space, but staying close enough to hear every word. Logan knelt beside Ellie's chair, bringing himself to her eye level. Raindrops began to dampen his hair, but he didn't seem to notice. "Ellie, there's something very important I need to tell you," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I met you that day in the rain, but it wasn't just chance. We met because the world knew we shouldn't stay apart anymore. Ellie, I'm your brother." Ellie's face showed first surprise, then confusion, and finally, like sunshine breaking through clouds, radiant understanding. She was silent for a few seconds, taking it all in, her big blue eyes, so much like his, wide and bright. Then, without warning, she leaned forward and hugged him with all the strength her small arms could muster. "My brother, she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "You're really my brother. I knew you were special." Logan wrapped his arms around her, tears now mingling freely with the rain on his cheeks. "And I'll never leave you again. Understand?" he promised, his voice hoarse. "I'll always be here. For everything." Rachel, watching just a few feet away, placed her hand over her heart. Her eyes were damp, not with sorrow, nor merely relief, but a deeper emotion. For the first time since learning she was pregnant, alone, frightened, abandoned, everything felt right. The rain continued falling around them, but none of them cared. In that little circle of 3, mother, daughter, brother, something complete had formed, something the years and circumstances had tried to deny, but fate had insisted on bringing together. Ellie, still hugging Logan, glanced at her mother and extended her arm, inviting her to join. Rachel stepped into the embrace, creating a perfect circle under the rain that washed away the past and blessed the future. The message arrived on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday. Rachel was sorting clothes to wash when her phone buzzed. It was Logan. "My father wants to meet you this afternoon, if possible, at the coffee shop near the park." Rachel sat on the edge of the bed, heart pounding. Though she'd agreed to the possibility, the reality hit her. Richard Carter, the man who'd abandoned her pregnant years ago, who only acknowledged Ellie's existence after being forced by his son, wanted to see her. "I'll be there," she replied, after a brief hesitation. Ellie was at school, busy with a new science project that thrilled her. Ever since Logan revealed he was her brother, she had a newfound confidence. as if that missing puzzle piece in her life had finally clicked into place. The coffee shop was discreet and upscale, the kind of place where executives held informal meetings away from prying eyes. Rachel arrived a few minutes early, choosing a corner table with a view of the entrance. She wore a simple but nice dress, hair pulled back in a low bun, minimal makeup. She hadn't dressed to impress Richard, but to feel secure in her own dignity. Logan had offered to come along, but she declined. This conversation needed to happen between her and Richard, no intermediaries. At exactly 3 o'clock, he walked in. Rachel recognized him immediately, despite the years. The same blue eyes shared by Logan and Ellie, the same imposing posture. Older, with fully grey hair, but still carrying that aura of power she remembered so well. He spotted her and approached with measured steps. There was no arrogance in his walk this time. He seemed almost subdued, maybe even nervous. "Rachel," he said, stopping in front of the table, "thank you for coming." She gestured to the chair opposite her, not standing up. "Mr. Carter." "Richard, please." He sat, placing a small, gift-wrapped package on the table. "Can I order you a coffee?" Rachel nodded, more to buy time than out of desire for the drink. While Richard placed the order, she studied him. He was different, not just older, but carrying a vulnerability he'd never shown before. "Logan told me Ellie knows now," he said, after the waiter left, "that he's her brother." "Yes, we told her a few days ago. She was very happy." Rachel paused. "Kids have an amazing ability to accept truths when they're presented with love." Richard nodded, a slight smile touching his lips. "She seems extraordinary. In the photos I saw..." He hesitated. "She has our family's eyes." The silence that followed wasn't exactly uncomfortable, but it was heavy, with untold stories, with 6 years of absence. "Why did you want to see me?" Rachel asked eventually, cutting to the chase. "Logan could have arranged everything for you to meet Ellie." Richard took a deep breath, as if summoning courage. When he spoke, his voice was firm, but gentler than she'd ever heard. "Because I was wrong. I wronged you, and the daughter I didn't even know I had." He held her gaze without looking away. "I can't undo the past, but if you'll let me, I want to be part of her future, to meet her, to ask for forgiveness, sincerely." His words, so simple and direct, struck Rachel deeply. It wasn't what she expected. Maybe a lengthy explanation, maybe an attempt to justify the unjustifiable. Instead, there was only acknowledgement and genuine remorse. "Why now?" she asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "After all this time?" Richard looked at his hands. "The easy answer is to say that Logan forced me, that I'm only doing it to keep peace with my son." He raised his eyes to hers. "But the truth is that when I saw Ellie's pictures, when I heard about her courage and her intelligence, I realized I was missing something priceless, something I couldn't get back." The coffee arrived, interrupting them momentarily. Rachel cupped her hands around the mug, feeling its warmth. "Do you know how many times I tried to speak to you?" she asked, taking a sip. "In those first months, when I found out I was pregnant, how often I was turned away at your company's doors." The pain in her voice was palpable. For the first time, Richard looked genuinely affected. "I know now," he admitted. "Logan found the records. I'd instructed security to keep certain situations away. I never imagined..." He shook his head. "No excuses. I hid behind power and money because it was easier than facing the consequences of my actions." Rachel listened in silence. His words hurt like old wounds reopening, but also brought an odd sense of release. For years, she'd carried that rejection alone, wondering what more she could have done. "Ellie never suffered because you weren't around," she said after a pause. "I made sure of that. I didn't want her growing up missing someone who chose not to be there." "You're an extraordinary mother," Richard said, genuine respect in his voice. "You did what I didn't have the courage to do, face responsibility." Another silence, less tense now. Rachel observed him, no longer the intimidating executive who fired her, but a man in his 60s facing his regrets. "If you really want to meet Ellie," she said carefully, "then start like the rest of us did, with truth, with consistency, with humility." Richard nodded, accepting her conditions without argument. That's all I ask, a chance. It won't be my way or yours, Rachel continued. It'll be hers at her pace, and never, she emphasized, never make a promise you can't keep. She's been through enough. I understand, he replied solemnly, and I accept all your conditions. Rachel finished her coffee. She has swim practice tomorrow afternoon. After that, we'll go to the park for a snack. If you'd like, you can join us there as a family friend for now. Richard's eyes shone with gratitude. I'll be there. Before leaving, he pushed the small package toward her. It's not really a gift, just something I thought she might enjoy. Rachel accepted it without opening it, sensing it was a book. She nodded in thanks and got up. Richard walked her to the door, keeping a respectful distance. Rachel, he called as she was about to leave, thank you. Not just for today, but for everything you've done for Ellie all these years. She simply nodded and left, feeling strangely light. The next day, as planned, Richard showed up at the park. He wore casual clothes, so different from his usual immaculate suits. Logan was there too, sitting on a nearby bench, watching carefully. The introduction was simple. Ellie, this is Richard, a friend of the family, Rachel said. He wanted to meet you. Ellie, in her wheelchair, held out her hand politely. Nice to meet you. Are you Logan's friend too? Richard hesitated only a second. Yes, I've known Logan for a long time. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. It was a start, though. The rest would come slowly with time, when Ellie was ready. In the following weeks, Richard began to hover on the periphery of their lives. He never forced his presence, never demanded anything. He was simply there, taking Ellie out for ice cream after therapy sessions, applauding when she won a prize at the science fair, patiently listening as she explained the constellations she'd learned to identify. On one such afternoon, as Ellie demonstrated the small maneuvers her new chair could do, Logan watched from a distance. He realized that helping Rachel and Ellie hadn't been some noble act. It was a moral obligation, yes, but also a personal need, the need to belong, to be part of something bigger and more genuine than himself. He had chosen to stay, not just pass through their lives, not just give money or gifts, but to be there day after day, building bonds that went beyond the blood they shared. The real change, he realized, hadn't come from revealing the truth about his connection to Ellie. It came from backing up that truth with consistent actions, with a constant presence, with love shown not only in words but in daily gestures. As he watched, the clouds that had threatened rain all afternoon began to clear. A shaft of sunlight broke through, illuminating the little group in the park. Ellie in her chair, Rachel by her side, Richard leaning in to hear her every word. Logan smiled. The rain was gone, and the sun was coming out. It was as though nature reflected the transformation in their lives. A new story was beginning, he thought. Not perfect, not without challenges, but rooted in something none of them had fully possessed before. Truth, empathy, and presence. In the end, that was all that really mattered. The choice to stay, day by day, in the lives of those we love. Everything else, money, comfort, opportunities, was just a result of that fundamental choice. Ellie waved at him, calling him to join them. Logan stood and walked over, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face. Life, with all its unpredictability and beauty, went on. And that was enough. A future shaped by honesty, empathy, and shared moments, together, under the same sky that had once brought them together in a rainstorm. Ellie smiled as he approached, her little arms reaching out, and Logan knew, come rain or shine, he would stay. This was their story, a story of recognition, responsibility, and love. And it was only the beginning. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like, because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.